as we come to the end of the day, it's nice to just sit down beside the fire, glass of wine. The dragons tend to like to congregate around the fire about this time as well. And we pick up whatever latest journal is we're going to read. Classic Adventure is quite popular around here. Your mind turns to the heavy responsibility of wearing this hat as head of Retro Division. And in fact, it's just heavy because of all the wire to keep it up. You think, we've got a lot of history to recover, so let's have a little fireside tale, shall we? Actually, come on up to the table and join me. We're quite modern here. We don't even use quills anymore. We have decent fountain pens. The Spell Research Division had access to Alpha and a PDP in the 70s until that game came along. Well, that's what the system admin called it. I thoroughly loved it. So the chief wrangler of the department managed to make it so that you couldn't play the game except out of hours. And that sort of led to a bit of an interest from all the wizards in how they could play it at home. First of all, what could you have played Colossal Cave on in the 70s? Where could you have bought it? And where would you have learned about it? So question one is, what sort of home computer could you have bought? Of course, you'll be well aware from some of our research articles that during the 70s, you may have had the Scrumpy and the competitor, the MK14 from Science of Cambridge, later Sinclair. And I'd love to say that Maze on the MK14 was the first game you could buy and play on a British home computer. But of course it was a magazine article. No, we really need to go perhaps with the sort of computers that were around at that time. So going through the library, we've pulled some of our books. This is a really good book. Home Computers, 100 Icons That Defined a Digital Generation. And it's got a huge range with some lovely photographs from the Centre for Computing History. It doesn't have our beautiful Heathkit H8, H9, H17 in here, which is unusual. It does, of course, have the classic MITS Altair 8800, which really popularised home computing as opposed to these sort of microprocessor kits in the United States. Beautiful pictures. It does have it does cover the early ages, the Rockwell, the Apple, obviously, TRS-80, in this case is the Model 3, obviously Atari, of course, and of course the Science of Cambridge MK14. The Research Machines 380Z with the original white front panel, and the Acorn System 1. Well, PET is in here as well. So they're really the Apple, the PET and the TRS-80 are considered to be the definitive early home computers, I suppose, that came over from the United States. Of course, Personal Computer World only started in early 1978 with the NASCOM on the front. New and perfectly British. It was a bit of a looking at the 7768 as well, an available multi-board computer. And we probably also, the second one, as we said, the PET really started to arrive and came over here. We were still advertising the latest edition of the Scrumpy 3, which meets what we will see as a definition of a home computer. It has a keyboard that produces ASCII characters and a screen display, perhaps. They did quite like the PET 2001, although not a lot of people like the chiclet. We really have to go, I suppose, to a magazine like Electronics Today, and their supplement in the centre of the June 1978. This really covered again, opened with the NASCOM, featured the Scrumpy. It has, of course, the PET and the H8. And just inside we've got the Scrumpy, as we said. So, and of course the MK14 being advertised. So this is really the sort of state-of-the-art article. And an interesting discussion is that so a home computer should be able to accept input from an alphanumeric keyboard and provide an output to a VDO or a printer. It must be capable of supporting a high-level language, e.g. BASIC, which should be either in ROM or readily and quickly capable of being loaded from some form of mass storage device, which of course the H8 could from cassette. And really this is sort of a good snapshot of which machines were around at that time. And that central chart was the Commodore PET at £695, the Tandy TRS-80 at £500, the Apple at £995, research machines at £1,063, the NASCOM one at its £197.50 for a kit, the Kim one, again ready built, was £145, which is quite impressive. The SWT-PC, you could gather either £275 a kit. Most of these only had 4K, or the PET had 8K, but they had very small amounts of memory, 1K for the Kim one. The Heathkit H8 had 4K as standard, but easily expanded to 8K. So, and that was £400. The Kremenko Z2 for the CPU only, £395 as a kit. And the MSI was available, £375 as a kit. And of course the Scrumpy 3 at £189.75. So really that would have been what you were looking at in sort of mid-78 to buy a computer. And all of them promise a floppy by the autumn or later that year. And indeed H17 was launched. Which would you have picked? What would you have done? It would have been down to money, it would have been down to your ability to build a kit. But the reality is the memory was the key, and we touched on that. I'm sure most people's actual experience of the game on a home micro in the UK probably didn't happen until the ZX81 in 1981, 1982 you could actually buy the Abersoft copy of Adventure, which required 16K RAM expansion. And in fact, the very first issue of Classic Adventurer has an article by John Jones Steele as its first article about Abersoft and that Adventure 1. So, well worth getting it if you haven't got this issue. And it was a very clever use of Ken Reed's original article, of course, same as Quill was based on in Practical Computing of August 1980. That article was used by Arctic as well, and Kevin Toms in his book and his system. Quite an important part of the way that games were produced subsequently. The Arctic games, Adventure A, B, C, D, etc. And they're probably some of the earliest adventure games I remember playing on the ZX81. I did have the Abersoft Adventure, but that was on the Spectrum, I think, soon after I got the Spectrum. So of course we come to question 2. What is Colossal Caves and where did it come from? Which is also, again, admirably covered in issue 1 of the magazine, in how and the background to Colossal Caves. If you prefer other resources, there's a great video that covers the Microsoft, the MS-DOS version, Gordon Letwin, which was also available on the TRS-80, which of course is a Z80 based machine, which ran 8080 instructions, remember, and you might be working out where I'm going with this. There were obviously a lot of games before Colossal Cave in the mainframe world, and in fact the maze game on the MK14 probably owes more to the game Wander, which was a way of simulating wandering around somewhere, than it does to the classic adventure. Most people consider the version was further developed by Woods on top of Crowther's original around 76, 77 to be the one that was more widespread. Woods' one did spread around the early internet. Of course, he was a developer of routing software, early routers, and how Crowther found him. Well, he'd been away on holiday when probably the first widespread phishing attack on the nascent internet, by sending out an email to every Crowther app and the domains that were on the internet. It's probably worth pointing you to another great resource for adventures, which is the Jimmy Maher site, Digital Antiquarian. He links to some excellent source material, like the article by Dennis Jerz in Digital Humanities Quarterly, that really does a deep dive into the Crowther original. Resulted in a game that spread quite rapidly around the PDP community, and in fact led to some of the other companies getting set up, like Infocom, who really made their games available even on the PDP 11, and soon onto these machines, the Zork Trip, which is, you know, generally considered to be based in that sort of environment of caves and exploring the subterranean environment. I won't go over the whole history of Colossal Cave. There's plenty of resources pointed to below, all with the background of his desire to create a game that represented his caving experience and something he could do with his kids. With the scoring elements added by Woods at a later date. There's another documentary you should definitely watch if you haven't already, which is covered in issue 6 of the Classic Adventurer. A bit of an American twist, obviously, but it is a very good look at Colossal Cave's background and history, including a little bit of footage of actually exploring the cave. I've linked to a short section that is just exploring the cave section. It's a good article about the whole thing. Well worth exploring as well. Now, most people would consider Scott Adams' AdventureLand, the sort of derivative game. It's called Adventure First in the early advert, as the first one you'd be able to get for things like the TRS-80 and the Apple. So anyway, back to which machine you could buy and play the original on at home in the UK. I was fascinated to read on the also excellent adventure resource site Renga in Blue from Jason Dyer an almost throwaway comment on the top of the AdventureLand article. Nearly has the distinction of being the first text adventure available for home computers, slightly edged out by a port for the Heathkit H8 of Adventure, which is debuted in August by Gordon Letwin, who later went on to make the port Microsoft Adventure, being sold in issue 4 of the magazine REMark, 4th quarter of 1978. Now, Gordon, obviously the Microsoft Adventure and the TRS-80 version, was also the author of H-DOS OS, as he was employed by Heath at the time. As an aside, the Digital Antiquarian in his AdventureLand Part 2 article mentions that he thinks that Softside, which is where this advert for Adventure appeared, is perhaps the first platform-specific magazine, because issue 1 was in October 1978 for the TRS-80. But actually, REMark, the Heathkit user group magazine's first issue, was much earlier, as they had 4 issues of a quarterly magazine in 1978. And it's in that REMark issue that Adventure occupies quite a few pages. It also has the advantage that it's only $10, not the $24.95 that Adventure was being advertised at. So let's take a look at that copy of REMark, shall we? Now, I have linked below so you can read it yourself online. It's got a lot of coverage in here. HUG was the Heathkit user group, and the Softkit catalogue provided a list of different things. We see a list of materials that were available to members to date, and there's not a great deal on the disc if you look, but Adventure H8 part number 88511010 for $10 is here, and in fact this interfacing on cassette is available December 15th, so pretty much looks like it was one of the first disc programs available. We'll find that it is mentioned on the page 8, Artificial Intelligence for the H8, Adventure for H-DOS. And that's the artificial intelligence moniker is quite interesting, because Infocom called them computerized fantasy simulations before interactive fiction term was coined. So on page 8 we find that article, Welcome to Adventure, including a sample run, which goes over a little bit of the background of it, and it basically then runs through a part of the game initial transcript, really. So that's just fascinating. I love this. You should be on page 26. So we go back onto page 26, we've got the rest of it, and they managed to score 34 out of the possible 350 using 157 turns. We also find it on page 32, finally, on the back page, where it's mentioned that to get your copy, use the green order form for $10 and the part number. But the interesting bit is this: they say it was first shown at the PC78 computer show in Philadelphia in August. Perhaps thousands played a multi-user version of the adventure on the H8 system. That's interesting, perhaps lost to time. But the same game cleverly squeezed down to reside in less than 24K by Gordon Letwin. That particular computer show is actually mentioned in Personal Computer World in the UK in July 1978. It sounds like it was going to be pretty big, really, 4 days at Philadelphia. So obviously well worth a visit that would have been, and you'd have been able to play Adventure on the Heathkit H8 computer. Onward then, we've established perhaps that AdventureLand was not the very first. It was definitely the version for the H8 with its H17 disk drives. So obviously it was one of the goals of mine to be able to get the H8 up to a position where I could play it. I haven't got the H9 terminal working yet well enough, but we have got the rest of the equipment well enough to actually play. The other thing to make, or point to make, obviously, is you did need quite an extensive set of equipment. You needed the Heathkit itself. You needed to have expanded the 8K, 4K RAM card to 8K, and you'd have needed 3 of those boards, or one of them, that in addition to one of the new 16K RAM boards that came out when the H17, because it's generally considered you needed minimum of 16K for the H17 disk drive and HDOS, which is quite a surprising amount of money, especially within the United Kingdom, for a machine. We'll go back a few days to where we successfully managed to get Advent running on the H8, as you would have been able to play it in, if you'd have bought this outfit in late 78. This particular version obviously would be from 1979 because it's HDOS 1.5, but it's pretty much the same sort of setup you'd have got very early on then to be able to play it from that original demonstration in Philadelphia in August of 78. So chances are this would have been one of the earliest ways, even in the UK, you could have played Colossal Cave on what we can call a home computer. From the written set of names of files to remove off of a freshly sysgen disk, I did a flags on syshelp.doc, help, onecopy.abs, flags.abs, set.abs, rms, msg.sys, each of the driver files, DVDs, ND, ATH84, ATH85 and LPHRD, and then when you do a cat they appear in the listing and you can delete them, so I did a delete star.star and that removed them all. Then I did a mount on the SY1 disk image of the adventure disk, and that allowed me to copy the relevant files, which is just in order to leave room for save files you need advent.abs, adventure.database file, and the new game .sav. So I've written out a label which we're going to put onto the disk so we know what we've got, and that should fit in there hopefully. There you go, doesn't quite cover that. So that is now a bootable 1.5 disc with Adventure from 1979 on it. Hopefully you can see the screen as we go through the process to boot into it and play Adventure on a single disc drive. The SVD is obviously now not needed. We are just original. The only thing we haven't got is the H9 terminal. So first thing we have to do is turn off the IRQs so we can get the boot. Then we're going to do a register PC, alter 030000, alter and then go, and that will boot the HDOS hopefully. So we've got a boot, we can press return, and we can then flick it. We've got 24K RAM, volume is mounted, Okay, and date 10th of August 79, let's set it back a bit. So we press return now to confirm it's still that date. And we have it, and now if I do a cat on the disc, we should see that we have Adventure.abs, Adventure.dtb and newgame.cav. It's 3 files, 246 sectors, 30 sectors free. That's just enough to get another save file on, because it's if you want to continue your game on a disc, single disc system, you've got a bit of fiddling about to do. So if I start Advent, which cave, so it's newgame.cav in this case, we're going to be running a game. If I say would I like instructions, I would need the advent.doc, I think, which will not be, oh no, it's not, oh no, that's there, it's fine, so we do get it. So we've got the original thing, you don't actually need that file which I removed in order to provide a save file position. So, and this is an original one, which is originally from the W.Crowther and the Don Woods additional ones, and microprocessed version by J.G. Letwin of Heath Company. So you'll stand at the end of a road before a small brick building. Around was a forest. A small stream flows out of the building and down the gully. So let's enter the building, maybe. Inside the building, well house for a large spring. Some keys on the ground, shiny brass lamp nearby. There's food here and there's a bottle of water here. So get the keys, and we get the lamp. Food, and we get the water. Okay, so if we go now west, out to the road, south to the bottom of the road, valley, rocky bed, stream on the slit, the 20-foot depression without grate is locked, so we can unlock the grate, and the grate is now unlocked, so we can open the grate, I think. Already unlocked, that's fine, so now we can go down, and the small chamber, and then to the west, and dim light at the end of the passage, small wicker cage, so we get the cage, and go west again, and it's pitch dark, so we now know we're going to light the lamp, and the lamp is on, and we're in the debris room with XYZZY, and a 3-foot black rod, so a rusty star on the end. Now I haven't got time to play on with this, I'm sure we've all seen that game progress, so if I'm going to save now, and what's the name, I'm going to make it tim.cav. Okay, and I would advise you if you're playing on a single drive to quit at this point, and I do, for a very simple reason, that there's not going to be any room to save another file on the disk. So what I'm going to do for the next time I play, I am going to delete newgame.cav, which will allow me, if I want, the next time I'll have 20, 30 odd sectors free again, and I will be able to do it. So if I restart the game, Advent, which game, new game, in this case I'm going to want tim.cav. And for those who haven't restored the save game, thank God we let me out. I was getting claustrophobia, and we're back in the debris room where we started, and we can now carry on playing and save, and we keep creating a new file, delete on a single drive machine. So once the H9 is running, that will be a way you can play Adventure on a H8. And the Colossal Caves has spawned a huge amount of books about, and just generally adventure in writing your own adventure games. Books everywhere. An entire book on the spectrum of adventure, history of interactive fiction on something, and even in foreign markets, Adventure Colossal obviously is the guide to the adventure scene in Spain. Which of course one of the first games from Aventuras AD was a Colossal Cave translation into Spanish. And the quill itself spawned the Illustrator, the graphics package. Later, Paul And of course we've got the Code Writer American versions here, which when I was going through the archive, I was quite surprised to find that I did actually have a copy of the IBM version, which I didn't remember they'd done, and an Atari, and an Apple one. So I don't actually have an Apple to try the disc on, and I'm going to have to do a bit of research to see if that Apple version is available anywhere online. That is a lovely alternative history story. We can just imagine the memo at the Welsh Wizards Tower. Finance would always check what that disc was. And with that $2,500 being the equivalent of over 10,000 UK pounds in 2021, a more likely history would have been an MK14 with an extra 256 byte RAM expansion, of course, cassette interface, tape deck, and copies of Computing Today and the MK14 user group magazine complement an ad, so we could play Maze, and even better, write our own games based on it. Would we have to call that a prequel? This has been a Welsh Wizards of Adventure production. Idea by, researched, written, directed, set and props, acted, filmed, narrated, produced and edited by me. So it's all my own fault.